In this video, we're going to supercharge the caged method and stretch it into something really bluesy that will even help you with your lead playing. Hey, John here, and this is your Tuesday Blues. And yeah, I didn't want to believe it. I pushed away from it for years, but for me, there's really no better system of organizing the chaos that is the guitar fretboard than the caged system. Years ago, when I finally sat down with the caged method and even took it beyond its basics, I realized just how versatile it is, and we're going to get into that in this lesson. But before we put the caged method through its bluesy paces, if you've never heard of it before, here it is in about 30 seconds. Let's put 30 seconds on the clock and see how we do. So caged is an acronym, and each letter in the word caged represents a chord shape coming from a common open position chord. There's your C shape, that's the C in caged. Here's A, G, E, and D. It's all about the shape of the notes on the fretboard that make up these common chords. And the cool thing is we can convert them into closed shapes that we can move into different chords, right? We can change this A shape chord into a movable bar chord. And now we've got a C chord, but it's an A shape, all right? Think about the shape. That's going to come in handy in the rest of this lesson. All right, how'd we do? Was that 30 seconds? Hopefully that makes sense. I know that's fast. There's a lot of material out there, even on the basics, but that's really it in a nutshell. But now we can make caged work for us in a bluesy style by converting each of these 5 shapes into bluesy dominant 7th chords. Let's do that. Let's start with our C shape. Here's C, and we can convert this into a bluesy dominant 7th chord just by putting the little finger down on that flat 7, which is the 3rd string, 3rd fret. And this little shape becomes movable. C, D, E, F, G, and so on, right? All the way up the fretboard. Wherever your root is, that's the chord, but it's the same C shape. Continuing, we can do the same thing with A, just by lifting up. And you might want to refinger some of these. We're going to do that here. And then we can move this up. There's a C, but it's an A shape. Think shape here. D, E, F, G, all right? And we can continue that through the entire system. We've got our G shape, which is really kind of probably one of the more difficult ones to wrap your head around because I'm really playing this shape. The full shape is almost unplayable for a lot of us, but this is very movable. There's our G shape, A, B, C, D, E, all right? And then we can move on to E. We're going to really unpack this one later in the course, but we can refinger this and make it movable in this way. Move along with that movable shape. There's a G, but it's an E shape. This is G7, by the way. A7, B7, C7, D7. Hopefully you're starting to get the idea here. And the same thing with D. There's our D shape, and we can convert this to a D7 shape. And we can further convert this into something movable. And now we've got F, G, F7, G7, A7, right? B7, C7, and so on. Now, I spent a lot of time working on these shapes, and they are ingrained in my playing. I use them all the time, and if you've been hanging out with BGI for a while, you probably do too. Even with the acoustic finger picking stuff that we normally play, these shapes show up everywhere, from Robert Johnson tunes, Mississippi John Hurt. They pop up. They're very important to learn, so spend some time with them if you haven't already. These shapes are foundational, and I really want you to get them down, so I put together a quick download for you to help you get there. There's a link where you can pick that up in the description. All right, so here's the super cool part that will really help your lead playing. You ready? We're going to connect each of the 5 7th chord shapes to one of the 5 patterns for the minor pentatonic scale, the scale we use all the time when jamming the blues. This will help you see the scale and the chord as 2 interrelated things. Now, they're not. There's some note differences here and there, but the blues is so closely tied together with the minor pentatonic scale and seventh chords, that learning them together and learning how to switch fluidly between the two really helps to amplify everything. So let's give that a spin. In the extended lesson for members of BGI, we're going to go through all 5 shapes, but right now I want to focus your attention to just one shape. And it's a very important one. We're going to take the E shape and we're going to make it into a bluesy dominant 7th chord by lifting the ring finger off the 4th string. All right, and now we're going to make it movable by refingering it, and that gives us the index finger here and makes it available to play notes along the 6th string, which is really important because that's where the root of this shape is. Okay, there's the E, making this an E7. We move it up 1 fret. We've got an F at the 1st fret, 6th string, so we've got an F7. We're going to move this up to the 3rd fret so that we have a G7 for our example here. And what we want to do is build a minor pentatonic scale around this chord shape right here in this position. So we're going to play the root, then we're going to move up to the 6th fret, then switch strings to the 5th string, play 3rd fret, 5th fret, and then switch strings up once more to the 4th string, and we're going to play 3rd fret, 5th fret again. The intervals are root, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, and minor 7th, and then here's the octave. But we can continue through the strings and play through another octave. So here's our G, that's the root, and we're going to play the B flat, the minor 3rd here, 3rd fret, 3rd string, up to the 5th fret for our C, D on the 3rd fret, 2nd string, that's the 5th, and then that minor 7th up at the 6th fret on the 2nd string, and then an octave here on the 1st string, 3rd fret. But we can also reach up and play that minor 3rd on the 6th fret here as well, 1st string. So you might know this as box 1. Here's the big box pattern. Coming back down. All right, and a great way to practice this is to play the chord and strum through the chord and pick out the scale. It helps to attach these two things. But even better than that is to come up with a cool little rhythm move and play a very short phrase from the scale. Just start integrating the two. And what you've done is really linked these two. And if you practice this way, then you're kind of reinforcing what you're learning as you're learning it in a real musical way. I really love that way of practicing the chord and the scale together. It actually came up on our latest members only live session. Thanks, Flo. Play a short rhythm comp on a chord and then play a phrase from the scale that's right there in that same position. Jam with yourself, switch back and forth, and really get into the jam. So here's the D7 chord shape moved up into G. Here's the G root note, all right? And we can build a minor pentatonic scale box pattern around this chord. Just think of the chord as the anchor, the point on the fretboard that hopefully you've practiced really well. It's familiar to you. It comes from something kind of already familiar, hopefully the open chords. Even if it's this one, just tweak it to a 7, move it, and come on up. Even if you don't play the full thing, right? When you see that, you should think and attach it to this pattern that we're about to get into. Start here on the root, come up to the 8th fret, next string, and then the 1st string. And we can go below this root too, here. Back up. All right, and here's the whole scale. So the point is that now if you know this chord shape really well and you can attach the minor pentatonic scale to it, then licks are right here under your fingers when you find yourself here on the fretboard. And in fact, I used this as a waypoint, as a marker on the fretboard when I was opening up that jam at the beginning of the video. The first couple of phrases came right from me thinking about this chord shape, right? And thinking about the pentatonic scale that surrounds it. All right, remember, if you're a member, just look for Tuesday Blues 366. You've got an extended lesson here where I walk through the other 3 shapes and scale patterns that fit together, and we'll also break down the entire jam at the beginning of this lesson. Now, we can relay each phrase in that opening jam back to a chord position, and that's really what was in my mind when I was jamming on this 1-chord groove. I was simply finding my anchor points, my G7 chords, using the different caged positions, and then tearing into some pentatonic licks that are right near those chord tones. It helps me tremendously to see the similarities, and it helps me organize the fretboard and see pathways, which will help me shift positions and climb up the neck, connecting those shapes. But now here's an example of this in action. Let's break down the first couple phrases from that jam. So the backing track is grooving on G and G7, and what we're going to do is start out thinking about this shape, right? So I opened up this solo with a slide into the D on the 3rd string, 7th fret, and then followed it up from 6 to 8 on the 2nd string. That's the F to G, and then this move. All right, and that was a really slick way to shift positions. We're going to talk about that, but I want to point out the chord shapes, the caged 7 shapes that I was really thinking about here. First off, you might notice this is coming from this D shape here. There's my root, D shape. Even though I may not play it all, it's more about thinking that this is home base. If I got lost, I could just kind of come back to this, hang out, or play with the chord tones until I reset myself. All right, so anyway, sliding up into that G again, all from here, and then this move, all from that shape. But what I want to do here is shift. I want to shift up the neck, and I'm going to use this minor 3rd from the scale to the major 3rd from the chord. And knowing these caged patterns, these caged chord shapes, really helps because this is a C shape G chord, and it's right there. All right, and that helped me to know. And I could play around with licks based on this chord shape and the minor pentatonic scale pattern that fits right around it. And we keep going because later on we shift up to this, which is an A shape G7 chord. And there's the minor pentatonic pattern that's connected to it. All right, remember to pick up your download connecting the 5 caged 7 shapes to the minor pentatonic scale box patterns, and don't forget to practice by jamming the chord and then the scale. You'll find licks that you didn't know were there. Thanks for checking out this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Until then, practice smart and play on.